I've been asked this question many times, and that is, what fly should I use? Hi, I'm Willie Bryson from Let's Go Fishing, and on today's video, I'm hopefully going to answer this question for you. However, you may not like the answer. We're about 4 weeks or less than 4 weeks from opening season, and the pictures you can see of these rivers still shows the pools are covered with ice, as well as St. Anne's Bay, which is complete salt water fed directly from the Atlantic Ocean, and it's still covered in ice. The pictures you see were taken yesterday, March 3rd, 2026. When the winter fades and the warmer temperatures come, the snow starts to melt on the mountains and the water starts running into the rivers. This additional water flowing into the rivers creates a torrent flow where the river's running much faster than usual. It usually bursts its banks early in spring because of the additional volume, which makes wading virtually impossible. The water is so dirty that you can't see the bottom, and fish tend to stay behind rocks, trees, or anything that can slow down that current, so deeper pools as well. With the mountains all around, it takes several weeks for the water flow to slow down to a normal range. Most anglers at this point are chomping at the bit to get their gear together and get out onto the river and do some early fishing. Now, before running down to the river with your new waders and boots and a box of generic flies, at least get to know a little bit about some of the flies that you're going to use. Here, I'll start off with a few things. Straight off of the Wikipedia website, here's how they describe what a nymph actually is. A nymph is the juvenile form of certain insects that undergo hemimetabolism or incomplete metamorphosis. Unlike larvae, which are found in holometabolous insects like butterflies, nymphs resemble the adult form but lack fully developed wings or reproductive organs. They undergo several molts known as instars as they grow and develop. Now, including myself, that's as clear as mud. So we'll move on to the life cycle of nymphs for dummies. So here we go. A female will lay eggs in the water or on a plant near the water. After hatching, this baby nymph stage can last from several months to a few years. These small nymphs go through stages where they shred their skin several times as they grow, with each stage changing their form as they develop wings, which changes them into what we know as an emerger. This is when a nymph leaves its cozy spot under rocks or in the bottom of the river and travels towards the surface. From a fly fishing point of view, this would be a wet fly that moves in the river between the bottom and the surface. At this point, the emerger sits on top of the water, letting the sun dry its wings, after which it's able to fly off, only to return a very short time later to lay its eggs, after which it dies and the cycle starts again. Now, science class dismissed. So you finally get down to the river just to see that it's running faster than normal, it's deeper than normal, and it looks like chocolate milk. And you don't have a clue what fly to use at this point in time. Unfortunately, there's no set answer to that question, because the reality is you can use nymphs, wet flies, and streamers all year long. This is the reason why there's no simple concrete answer as to what fly should I use. There are so many variables in this situation, including common sense and confidence. Okay, with this example, it's early spring. Nymphs can sit at the bottom of the river for 2 to 3 years, so they're the main source of trout food through this period of time. In fact, 80% of the time fish are feeding on nymphs. But there are hundreds of different nymph patterns. Which one should I use? This is where common sense comes in. The two main conditions here are the water is cloudy and fast. This should tell you that your nymph should have a heavy tungsten head and some color. The tungsten head will allow your nymph to sink quicker in the water to bounce off the bottom where the fish are sitting, while the color makes it more visible to the fish. Now, I'm not very knowledgeable on Euro-nymphing, but this would be a good place to start. You have a longer leader and tippet than normal with your nymph on the end, and you flick it upstream and let it come down. Now, it's not a long drift because you don't have a lot of line out, but you let it drift down to the end and flick it back up, and just repeat this over and over and over. These short runs are highly effective under these circumstances. If you do feel you want to cast out a little more line, you can cast out another short cast, keep as much of your floating fly line off the water as possible by holding your rod tip high and allow that drift to continue. You may want to have some loose line in your hand so that you can do several upstream mends to allow your drift to go a longer way. These upstream mends will help prevent your fly from dragging on top of the surface of the water. Now, because the current is faster on top of the water than it actually is at the bottom where your fly is, you have to do these upstream mends several times to stop your line from pulling the fly across the bottom. If you don't have weighted nymphs, you can always add a couple of split shot to your line, and this will do the same thing by pulling your line down quickly to allow the nymph to run off the bottom. The last suggestion I'd have in this situation is using a bobber. Oh, wait a minute. Fly anglers like to call it a sight indicator and not a bobber. No matter what you call it, I'd recommend that you use one. It's still a bobber that sits on top of the water, so you can see when a fish is taking your fly much sooner than you would feel it on your line without one. Here's a few examples. First is the different size plastic bobbers. You would pick the size that fits the weight of your line and fly. I personally don't like this style, even though it is easy to use. The second one is a wool indicator. This is excellent because it can be used in any speed of water without dragging your fly. The third suggestion is very similar to the second. It's called a New Zealand style indicator. It's really quick to install or adjust the depth while standing on the river. As for the nymph, I'd suggest for fast flowing cloudy water it'd be a rainbow perdigon nymph. It has a tungsten bead head, taper body to sink quickly, and some color for the cloudy water. There's fly anglers out there that would rather use streamers. Now, streamers are also a fly that can be used all year round. If you ask 10 people what their favorite streamer would be, you'd get 10 different answers. There's thousands of them. There's some that look exactly like a fish and others that look nothing like a fish, but apparently they still work. Now, my personal choice would be a woolly bugger. They come in all different colors, and you can get them with a beaded head or without a beaded head. And again, if we use common sense, if it's fast flowing water and you want to get down in the water column, you want to use a beaded head or a weighted head. If you don't have a woolly bugger with a weighted head, you can always add a couple of split shot to your line. Now, with the woolly bugger, you don't want that bouncing off the bottom because it represents a fish. You want it in the mid column. So be careful not to add too much weight to it. If you're using a streamer, there's a lot less of an issue in trying to get a natural drift. This streamer represents a small fish. Now, fish don't always swim straight. They can get into a current and drift sideways. They can do all kinds of different things. So with a streamer, you can cast straight across and let the drift take it. The only concern you have is not to have too much loose line between your rod and the streamer. So you can let this float all the way down to the end of the drift and then start retrieving, or you can cast it out and start retrieving as if it's swimming across the river towards you. Now, we're not always going to have this fast-flowing, cloudy water situation. So as spring starts to move on, but still in spring, the water gets clearer and slower running. Without the excess water in the river, it'll go back to its normal range. So fishing in this circumstance, you use common sense again. We went through the life cycle of a nymph, but now you have to get to know some of the nymphs that are in the rivers that you're fishing. So the simplest way to do this is when you first wade in, pick up a rock and turn it over. You've heard this a lot when people say match the hatch. Mayflies are the most popular nymph on most rivers, and the nymph stage lasts a couple of years before they fully hatch into an adult. So you'll usually find a lot of mayfly nymphs at various stages throughout the spring and summer. Sowbugs are another nymph. They're more flat and oval shaped with lots of legs. Now, I'm colorblind, especially with different shades of green. So I see primary colors really well, but if I turn over a rock, I see a bunch of creepy crawlies in shades of green and brown, and that's about it. But as I said, get to know a few of the basic types of nymphs in your area. Here's some I would suggest. A zebra midge is highly effective and versatile. It imitates various surface insects and it's easy to tie. A hare's ear, a classic pattern that works well in various conditions, mimicking subsurface insects. A pheasant tail, known for its adaptability and can be used for different depths and conditions. The perdigon nymph, a simple yet effective fly that mimics Baetis nymphs suitable for various water types. A prince nymph, great for fishing in low light conditions. It helps in targeting nymphs that are hard to see. Now, if you look online at images of these flies, you'll find a lot of different patterns. So from someone who ties ugly flies that catch fish, what that tells me is this: they will all catch fish. So pick one you like. The ones I typically use are the pheasant tail, the perdigon, and the prince nymph. Now, if river conditions are back to normal with a natural flowing river with clear water, you've turned the rock to match the hatch and picked your nymph that you'd like to use. So what's next? The exact same process we just spoke about. If there are no bugs on top of the water, then the fish are somewhere in between. Set up your rig with a nymph that will bounce off the bottom. Use your preferred method of a sight indicator, then cast it out. Try using the Euro-nymphing technique, just lobbing the fly out in front, keeping your fly line off the water. Then cast a little further using upstream mends to keep your drift as natural as possible. Repeat, repeat, and repeat. So here's where common sense comes in. If you're fishing a nymph off the bottom and not getting any strikes, then put on a woolly bugger and try fishing that at a mid-depth. And if it's sunny, use a bright colored fly. If it's cloudy, use a darker colored fly like olive or brown or black. And if the woolly bugger's not doing it, then put on a wiggly worm, either one of the pink ones or the red San Juan type. They should be able to get you a bite or two. And if they don't work, then I don't know. I figure it's just time to go home and drink beer. Oh yeah, that question we had at the beginning, what's the best fly to use? Well, with the information we went through today, the answer is simple. Whatever fly you've got confidence in. All flies will catch fish at some point, but won't catch fish all the time. So be prepared to change your fly from time to time when you're standing in the river. Now, I've been fly fishing for 60 years. I had someone many years ago tell me to use a muddler minnow. So I bought some and have tried using it again and again and again. And with no word of a lie, I have never caught a fish on a muddler minnow. Now, I'm a stubborn guy, so I will keep trying. But it's best you subscribe to my channel so we can celebrate together and you'll know exactly when I catch my first fish on a muddler minnow. But in the meantime, stay safe, be kind, and tight lines.